What's going on, guys, and welcome back to DSG. In this guide we'll be going over Gear 8 farming and efficiencies. Before we get started, I would love some honest feedback on how I can improve my videos. I got some very critical and harsh but honest feedback in my last video via Reddit and would like to hear more on how I can improve going forward. I do notice some nuances comparing Reddit users and YouTube users, and Reddit people are much more cutthroat, analytical, and more or less rude, in all honesty, when it comes to what they say. I took what they said into account, and if you're wondering, I am using a script for this particular video. So let's get back to the guide. First off, let's identify each of the Gear 8 pieces. The first piece we're going to identify are the common faction pieces, and these include your Downtown Hero Concrete Shards, your Downtown Villain Nylon Weaves, the Kingdom's Small Iron Rings, the Mythical Basilisk Scales, the Wild Spotted Toadstool, and the Oceanic Sea Glass. Number 2, the next gear is going to be illusions, and for newer players, regardless of the faction, these are simply identified as illusions. Our third piece will be the rare faction pieces, and these include the Downtown Hero Aluminum Rods, the Wild's Oddly Shaped Seed, the Oceanic Darkwater Sample, the Mythical's Torn Fable Page, the Kingdom's Royal Pattern, and the Downtown Villain's Barbed Wire. The next piece of gear are the epic pieces, and these include the Kingdom's Forgotten Jewel, the Mythical's Dragon's Tooth, the Oceanic Shell Fragment, the Wild's Grove Splinter, the Downtown Hero's Tiny Gear, and the Downtown Villain's Microchip. The final piece of gear we're going to identify includes the Essences and Dream Fragments, which are equivalent to droplets and strange fibers of lower gear tiers. Before going into each gear piece, I'd like to break down the metrics and rewards you would get from the Heroic, Tier 5, and Tier 4 raids. First, we're going to look into the Heroic raids. These calculations are based in a theory in a perfect setting where your club starts a raid exactly at midnight of the first day of the month, and we will use August as a reference. We'll be looking at 6-hour, 12-hour, and 24-hour completion raid times in this calculation. We'll be looking strictly at Gear 8 pieces, and we'll be ignoring any non-Gear 8 gear. In this perfect setting, if your club is completing raids in 6 hours, you will be completing 14 raids in a month. If your club is completing heroic raids in 12 hours, you'll be completing 13 raids a month. Lastly, if your club is completing raids in 24 hours, you'll be completing 10 raids in a month. Now, I won't list off all the metrics here, so please look at the images on the screen for your rewards, but they will become important as we look at Tier 5 and Tier 4 raids. Next, look at Tier 4 and Tier 5 raids. Now that with the same scenario, Tier 5 and below raids only have 24-hour cooldowns compared to Heroic's 48-hour cooldowns, so let's break down those numbers. For 6-hour raids, you'll be doing 25 raids in a month. For 12-hour raids, you'll be completing 21 raids in a month. And lastly, for 24-hour raids, you'll be completing 15 raids in a month. Now, what are the differences between the raids? On the surface, it may look like Tier 5 raids are the best because they give you better rewards than Heroics do. But you have to take into account that you only get 5 attempts in a 24-hour period, and depending on how good the RNG is, your club is probably better off doing Heroics. Now, if you look at Tier 4 versus Tier 5 raids and Heroics, there is obviously one missing gear piece in Tier 4, and that's going to be those epic pieces, which also gives another reason for your club to strive for Heroics. Lastly, with Heroics, you will be getting Ursula. And so in short, your club in general will be better off doing Heroics, as it will give you the most beneficial rewards. For me personally, I also would go for Heroics simply because to ease the repetitive nature that raids are bringing to the game. It'll also give a better quality life for all club mates. On this next section, we're going to talk about where to farm all this gear. First off, let's talk about those common pieces and illusions. I find the best value to farm these pieces is going to be in the exchanges, specifically the raid and token exchanges. Now, these pieces will rotate in these exchanges, but they will be in there at some point. I also strongly suggest going against farming these using energy, though this can change if these pieces get the drop rate boost as good as droplets did a couple months ago. Next are going to be the rare faction pieces. I like farming these pieces in club, token, and rotational tower events. If you don't know what I mean by rotational tower events, I'm talking about your Stitch and Triton events and so on. I highly suggest not getting these in the raid exchange, as there is much more value going for common and illusion pieces in the raid exchange. Now, I do suggest farming these pieces using energy, especially during double drops. The next piece I will talk about is going to be the epic faction pieces. This piece can only be found as rewards in tier 5 and heroic raids, as well as a raid exchange. These pieces cannot be farmed, which means you have no choice but to get them in the raid exchange. If you do have the ability to spend, you could potentially buy them with gems outright in the premium exchange. Lastly, the final piece we'll discuss are essences and dream fragments. Firstly, don't worry about dream fragments, you'll most likely get an abundance of them and they will accumulate into the thousands. On the other hand, I do prefer going for essences in the club exchange and the token exchange for the best value possible. I would not recommend farming these using energy unless you truly are in a crunch, especially for some of the harder pieces such as warding and hexing essences. Luckily, they do have some relative frequency in the token and club exchanges, and that'll do it for where I like to farm these pieces and where the best value is for each gear piece. Now, if you are wondering why I didn't talk about going for gems, I personally don't like to allocate my resources towards that. I'd rather use gems on energy and such, so I'm not much of a spender when it comes to getting these gear pieces outright using gems. In this final section, I will discuss just one tip, and that will be choosing which pieces to prioritize. For this case, you will use Fred. Like many characters, the most important pieces are going to be on the right side, specifically the bottom and the middle pieces. Most toons going from gear 7 to gear 8 will have warding and hexing essence pieces which grant them tenacity and potency. In general, you want to prioritize completing these two pieces. In Fred's case, I would prioritize the bottom right piece as it also increases Fred's speed. Another nuance to Fred's kit is that he has a second speed piece as well. With this in mind, I would complete the bottom right piece first, then his second piece where Fred gets another speed piece, followed by the right middle piece where he gets that potency piece, and after that, it's up to you to choose which piece you want to complete, as the final pieces don't really have much of an impact on his overall kit. They're mainly health, defense, and offense pieces, which is pretty standard across the board for all Gear 8 pieces. Now, that'll do it for our Gear 8 farming and efficiency guide. If you want to check out where the graphics will be, head over to the Discord and all the graphics we've posted there. If you have any further feedback, I'd love to hear it, as long as it's actually constructive and not rude and insensitive. Help us get to 1K subscribers, guys, as it will help bring a huge milestone to the account. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one.